Hello, listeners. Before we begin today's episode, we want to take a moment to offer a trigger warning. This episode contains discussions that may be triggering for some individuals. We'll be exploring sensitive topics that could evoke strong emotional responses or bring up difficult memories. We want to remind you to prioritize your mental health and well-being before listening, and even while listening. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or distressed during this episode, it's okay to take a break or stop listening altogether. Your safety and comfort are paramount, so please remember that you're not alone, and if you need support, don't hesitate to reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or your mental health professional. And if you're in crisis or need immediate assistance, please contact a crisis hotline or emergency services. In Maryland, it's 211. Thank you for understanding and for taking care of yourself as we delve into these important but potentially challenging topics. Now let's begin today's episode. Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Getting Rooted, the show that's all about the journey of being rooted, reclaiming one's own truth, and embracing destiny. I'm Janine Hansel from Pong, your host, and I am a licensed clinical professional counselor and trauma specialist in the state of Maryland. I'm also the founder and clinical director of Rooted Holistic Therapeutic Services. The content of this podcast is not counseling advice nor a substitute for individual therapy. The content is for information purposes only. The information provided is not intended to be used as a replacement for medical and mental health advice. Please seek and follow the advice of your licensed mental health professional. In this podcast episode, Healing the Past, Unburdening Mental Health, the past can leave deep emotional scars that affect our mental health. And in this episode, we're going to explore the importance of addressing past traumas, forgiving ourselves and others, and finding healing and closure. We'll discuss some techniques, some self-care practices, and ways to build resilience as we move forward to our journey. I have a guest with me today, Leah Forney, who is a visibility activator and a media domination strategist, that will be joining me in this discussion, Healing the Past and Unburdening Mental Health. Hey, Leah, how are you? Welcome to Getting Rooted.
Thank you for having me, Janine. I am good.
Thank you for joining us on our podcast this season. And so I want you to tell the audience a little bit about you, a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I am Leah M. Forney. I'm calling myself the Visibility Activator, and that is because I just have a very simple way to help people, women entrepreneurs in particular, get seen, get visible, and get paid. I have been boosting my own visibility for the last 6.5 years using media as well as speaking opportunities. And I'm also a sexual assault thriver turned activist and advocate. I've been speaking up and speaking out and advocating for sexual assault victims and survivors and thrivers for almost a decade. So April will make a whole decade that I've been doing it. And then I have a background in mental health myself. So I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I did about 10 years in the field, and then I was like burnt out and tired. And I was like, I need a break. But I feel like God is leading me back in that direction for some new things that he has me coming on. And then I'm also a 9-time published author. So I just released my 9th book on my birthday on January 30th, 2024. It's called Boss Women Pitch. 9 Keys to Revolutionize Your Media Game While Building Your Authority. And, you know, one of my favorite titles and accolades I always say is I'm a Jesus girl. Like, I love God. He loves me. We got some skin in the game. We've been rocking for a while. And so that's probably my favorite title amongst all the other things that I do.
Well, we have someone here with a lot of skills and a lot of backgrounds. I'm excited for us to get into this conversation today. I can relate to a lot of things. When I talked to Leah offline before we, decided to join forces in this conversation, she has a powerful testimony, a powerful story to kind of tell us and help us understand this journey of healing and the process. So I'm going to give you some space to kind of tell us and share with us your testimony around your sexual assault.
Yeah. So I was sexually assaulted January 27, 2013, literally 3 days before my birthday. And the guy that sexually assaulted me was actually somebody that I had met in the state of North Carolina. So I was new to the state of North Carolina, probably have been there maybe like a year. And I had brought me this car that ended up breaking down. I had a little hoopty. It ended up breaking down. And so I needed a vehicle. Because if you know anything about the state of North Carolina, like there's not public transportation like there is in the big cities. You know, I'm from New York, so I was used to like getting on a bus or a train, but you get to the South, it's very limited. So I needed a vehicle. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just go and see if I could rent me a car. So I ended up going to a local car rental place, and that's where I met him. He worked there, and when I couldn't rent a car, he offered to drive me home. So on the ride home, he asked if he could take me out on a date. And again, I was new to the city of Durham, North Carolina. I was like, you know, why not? Let's see. I wasn't really open to dating, but I was just like, you know, he seemed like a nice guy. I'll take him up on his offer. So we went on one date, and that one date told me enough about who he was that it just was like, you're not the guy that I want to continue to like get to know. So I had cut him off. Unfortunately, he did not like that. He did not like that I had cut him off. He didn't like that I rejected him. And so he started stalking me. And so it was like literally anywhere that I went in Durham, North Carolina. And if you know anything about the area, you can probably get anywhere in 10, 15 minutes. It just seemed like he was there. And I don't think I thought about it as stalking at the time. It just, at first, it was kind of like, oh, this is a coincidence. But then after like 5 or 6 times of me being in different places and he was there, it was kind of like, okay, now this is creepy. Like, why do I keep running into you? And so he was stalking me. And the day that he sexually assaulted me on January 27th, I was actually home in my apartment. I was waiting on a friend of mine to pick me up to go to church because at that time I still hadn't had a vehicle. And I got a phone call that a loved one passed. And so I was distraught. I was, hurt, the normal reaction that most people have when they get a phone call, someone has passed away. And so as soon as I got off the phone with getting that information, and he ends up calling me. And when he called me, he heard me distraught. He heard me sad. He heard me feeling, broken. And he was asking all these questions about what was going on and everything. And I was just like, someone just passed and all that stuff. And he used that as his way to come over. So he was like, well, let me just come check on you and let me just come and console you. And, you ever have one of those moments where it's like you feeling the pressure to respond, but then you do something against your better judgment. So I was just like, okay, fine. But little did I know he was already outside my apartment. And so, yeah, so he comes into my house. And what was supposed to be a moment of him consoling me actually turned into a moment of him badgering me about how I rejected him and how he didn't like it and that he felt some type of way. And so immediately I had this gut feeling that something was going to happen. I don't think that feeling was like, oh, girl, you about to get raped. It was just this instant gut feeling, this intuition that was like, girl, you in danger. Like something ain't right. And so I proceeded to try to get him out of my apartment and he wouldn't leave. And so I was like, okay, in my mind, I was like telling myself, Leah, just be calm. Don't lash out, just be calm. And so by the third time of me asking him to leave, he gets up from off the couch because he was in my living room. So I was thinking, oh, he's going to leave, right? And he proceeds to grab me and he rapes me right in my living room. And what felt like probably forever, lasted a few minutes, felt like forever. As soon as he left, I immediately ran to go pick up my phone because at that time, I'm still waiting on my friend to come pick me up from church. This is how the enemy works. Wow. And so she just so happens to at maybe 5-10 minutes after he has left my apartment, she shows up and I am distraught. I'm terrified. I'm shaking. And she's like, girl, what happened? And I'm telling her I was just raped. And she's like, Lee, you got to call the cops. And I'll be honest, the first thing that went through my head was, who's going to believe me? I am a Black woman in America who happened to be living in the South at the time. Who's going to believe me? That's literally what I'm like thinking to myself. I'm like, I can't call the cops. So what I ended up doing was actually what I know not to do. I got in the shower and I started just scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, trying to get his scent off of me, trying to get his touch off of me, all these things. And it took me 2 days for me to actually call the police. Yeah, my rape happened on a Sunday. I didn't report to Tuesday. And the reason why I ended up reporting is because my spiritual parents talked to me and they were like, daughter, you have to report. And the significance of my spiritual mom and dad is that my spiritual mother, she was the mother of a rapist. Like
Wow.
her son had done time, had been doing time for raping other women. And so she had this like really deep space in her heart for victims of sexual assault. And so she like hugged me. She told me it wasn't my fault and that she encouraged me to report. And so when I reported, I had a male detective that came to my house, and that male detective asked me 5 to 7 times, was I absolutely sure that I was raped, because I had went on the date with the guy. And I'll be honest, while he was talking, my eyes was looking at the gun in his holster, because in my mind I was like, you must want me to shoot you, because why would you keep asking me that? And so then I had a female detective that showed up who was assigned to my case, and she was just cold and callous. There was no empathy. There was no like, I can't believe this happened to you. None of that. And so we started the journey of me trying to get justice. And it started with me just trying to get a restraining order. And so he wouldn't be at work and he wouldn't be at the places that he said he would be at when they wanted to serve him. And so we had like 2 court dates that went by. And then the third one, he finally got served and he showed up. And so I went to court. My grandmother was with me in court. And I had a white male judge who basically didn't hear nothing I said, told me I was a woman scorned and that he did not believe anything about that I was raped, walked off the bench, didn't dismiss us, no nothing, just walked off the bench, went in his chambers, came back 5 minutes later and was like, oh, you still here? Yeah, case dismissed. So in that moment, I'm watching the man that I know raped me walk out of court with this grin on his face, and I'm left to pick up the pieces. So I have a breakdown moment. And when I break down, there was a white male sheriff who threatened to lock me up. And I'm thinking to myself, what? So you gonna lock me up, but the person that just has committed a crime, you do nothing. You let him go. So in that moment, I had to make a decision on like how I wanted to move forward. And I started going to therapy at the local rape crisis center. And that's kind of the beginning of me picking up the pieces of my life after that trauma and really starting to heal.
Wow, Leah, that is such a crazy story, but very similar, because a lot of women go through that. A lot of women don't get justice because they're not, they're not believed, or the system is rigged against them, or whatever. So many reasons, but it comes down to the victim not being heard and respected and, getting justice. And so you've been on this journey of healing. And I wonder for you, how have you navigated, this space, and what has been the impact on your life in dealing with this assault?
Whew, it was rough. I will tell you. So initially, after being sexually assaulted and starting therapy, I struggled with a few things. One, I struggled with PTSD. So my therapist diagnosed me with PTSD because I would have these really intense flashbacks, and then I would have this really hyper arousal. Like I would get easily startled. Like I hear a car door slam, I was jumping. Like it was so intense. And so she diagnosed me with PTSD, and my primary care doctor at the time prescribed me some medicine just to deal with like the anxiety. So for a long time, it was this feeling of like being on the edge a lot and kind of looking over my shoulder and feeling like, you know, who's coming after me. And then the other thing I struggled with was being attractive as a woman. So like I would literally go to therapy in a hoodie and sweatpants. Like I would not wear regular clothes. I would just be in a hoodie and sweatpants. And my therapist, she used to literally encourage me every session to like do something to get back to feeling like me, whether it was to get my hair done, my nails done, like do something. And I just wouldn't, because in my mind, I was like, well, my attractiveness is what got me raped. And so if I could look less attractive and less appealing to the opposite sex, then I can avoid someone trying to violate me. And so those were like two things that I struggled with for the first year after my sexual assault, because I didn't want to be beautiful. I didn't want to look good. I didn't want to be Leah. The other thing I would say too that most people don't think about or talk about, especially in the Black community, is hypersexuality. So there was a time in my healing that after my rape that I craved sex, and I thought it was weird. And I actually ended up with how God revealed it to me was I went to the movies with my grandmother, and I went to go see that movie Addicted that was like based on Zane's book. And I'm watching this movie and I was feeling so uncomfortable. Like I'm cringing in my seat. Like that's the level of
uncomfortable with your grandmother, right?
Right. I mean, she's enjoying it, but I'm also like everything I'm watching on this screen, I'm just like, this is so uncomfortable. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why. And as the movie was going on and it later revealed that the main character was raped, I was like, oh, that's where this uncomfortableness is coming from. Because I could not, it was just like, ooh, this is too much. And so I remember talking to my therapist about it. And she said to me, she was like, what most people don't realize is hypersexuality is so common with rape victims and survivors. And she was like, because what people don't get is that the sexual assault was about power and control. It wasn't about the act itself. And so someone took control over you, and what you're trying to do is regain that control. And so that's what we see with hypersexuality, is that you're not having sex because you're like, oh, I want to have sex and it's pleasurable. You're having sex because you want to regain control of that part of your life again and what was taken from you. And so she helped me to really understand that, because I was just like, why am I running towards the thing that was just like, I was just raped? And she was like, it's common. Like, you're either going to run from it or you're going to run towards it. And her giving me that perspective helped me. So like, those were like my main challenges, like just trying to regain control of my body again, regain control of my identity again, and then not having to deal with like the challenges of mental health and PTSD and anxiety.
Wow. Yeah. And I think, you're absolutely right. A lot of people don't know, and what we hear more of, I've worked with sex offenders, youth offenders, and a lot of them, as we know, they've been offended themselves in one way or another, or they've been groomed. So the act of doing so has led them that way. And so we see the hypersexuality that they're acting out what has happened to them, because they're either trying to gain control, they're trying to like figure out what is this thing that they're feeling. Yeah. So they're working it out through play and acting out, right? And so as adults, the way we do it is, like your therapist said, we're gaining control by doing and making a choice of who we're going to go after, right? Allow into our space. And so it's definitely that push-pull. And then on the other spectrum, people are afraid of it and they shut that whole part of them down, and part of them is no longer in operation. So we're just going to and go to a hill and not have sex ever again or think about sex. So it is very detrimental to our bodies, because our body keeps a score. Our body remembers even the yuckiest feelings when that is arousal. Is like, oh. And so you have to do something to either change that, suppress it, push it away, to make you feel, like you said, like yourself again. So it sounds like you experienced some very classic signs of trying to work through this process. So how long do you think it took you to gain some reestablishment of being healthy and feeling like yourself again after that assault?
Oh yeah, it took years. It really took years for me to get back to a place where I felt like Leah again. And if I had to give it a number, I probably would say the first 5 years after my sexual assault, because it happened 3 days before my birthday. For a very long time, I felt like even I couldn't celebrate my birthday because it was like a dark cloud. So it was like January 27th would roll around, and all of a sudden I'd be right back in those feelings and right back in that place. And so I had to continue to work through it with therapy. I had to continue to work through it with my relationship with God, and just like trusting my own healing process and healing journey. But it took some time. Like, it wasn't an overnight thing. Even though a year after my sexual assault, I was like starting to speak up about it, I still was like struggling. I still was like working through a lot of the stuff that I was still talking about publicly. But it took me about a good 5 years. And then year 5 came around. And actually, one of my good friends said to me, she was like, instead of looking at that day as such a dark day, like, why not look at it as it's a part of your rebirth? And so I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And so January 27th became a day that I reclaimed as my rebirth day. And every year it's the kickoff to my actual birthday celebration, because I wanted to take back my power. And I was like, I'm no longer going to let this feel like this heavy, dark cloud over me. Now I'm going to reclaim it. And I'm going to help other survivors to understand, like, you can take back your power. Like, you can redefine that sexual trauma. It does not have to define you. So year 5 was like when I started doing that. And so it's become kind of like a part of my birthday celebration every year. It's January 27th. My friends, my family, everybody know. And they'll be like, happy rebirth day, because they understand, like, that day once was significant for something very traumatic and very hard. And now that I'm on the opposite side of it, it's a day of celebration.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what rooted stand for, right? Reclaiming one's own truth and embracing destiny, and really not getting caught up in someone else's narrative or the narrative of society, but you get to choose how your story is written. Even with the hills and the valleys, there's still that opportunity to say, you know what, God, I'm choosing to use this as a stepping stone rather than a stone that's going to overtake me or push me down, or roll me down the hill, right? Like, it's going to be a stepping stone to where I need to go. Like, there's a purpose. And when I work with my clients, I'm like, I know we don't want to hear this, but it's a purpose while you're going through this chapter right now. There's a reason.
Yeah.
And asking why me, ask God, what do you want me to do with this now? What is the purpose? What's the intention for me to have part of my story? I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, it's interesting. I always, I know the Lord all my life. I'm a PK. I spend all my time in church, and I think up to like 32, I was like, what, life has not been too hard. Like, I really don't have like a trauma story, or I really don't have, like, things have happened to me, but it hasn't been like, oh my God, this is the worst thing, that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, God, I see you. Like, I'm like, I don't have that testimony to tell. And then I should have kept my mouth shut. Right? Like 3 years later, life started like to unravel, and it wasn't in the moment, felt like that. Like, things are still happening till to today. And I'm going to be 40 this year. So 5 years of constant, like, things happening. And I said, oh God, what is the purpose? Why am I enduring these challenges now, right? Why did the first 32 years of my life was not as bad as other people, right? I'm not here to compare, but like, I was questioning, like, am I just going to have this coochie life? Like, I need a testimony. Like, I'm a preacher, on my off time when I'm not a therapist. And so I'm like, I need that. I need that stepping stone that I can be like, yeah, the Lord delivered me from these things. And he gave me just that. And so instead of saying, okay, God, why is this happening to me? I said, why did you choose me? What is the purpose? How am I supposed to use this for the good? Right? Because all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord and according to his purpose. So you're working this out. for my good. I just don't see the good right now. Understand, like I work with sexual assault clients, and that's the thing, like they get stuck in that narrative, and it's a lot of work to unravel it because there's this stigma, like, oh my God, I'm a victim, right? That's the language. I'm a victim. But yes, you were victimized, but you are a victor at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like we're moving to a place that you can overcome even that big challenge.
Yeah.
And so that's why when I saw you know, your information, I was like, this is a powerful testimony because I work with people that have navigated this space and have and still navigating this space. And I wanted to give a message of hope that you can overcome, you can come to the other side, you can use this horrible situation for the good. So I
Yeah.
want to know from you, Leah, like what has been your process of your journey to forgiveness?
Oh, my journey to forgiveness was a journey. I remember the first time that as I was healing and starting to really speak out about sexual assault, that God said to me in prayer, I need you to forgive your perpetrator. And I was like, like, come again? You want me to forgive who, what, where, why? And because in my mind, I'm like, he has done something so horrible that is not deserving of forgiveness, right? And God was like, first of all, you're trying to be me. You can't be me, right? And I forgive you for things. But the thing that he wanted me to understand was that the forgiveness wasn't about him. It was really about me. And so I remember the very first time, because I'm one of those Jesus girls that, like, I might question and be like, this don't make no sense. But ultimately I'm gonna be obedient. And so I remember praying and just asking God to give me the words to release him. And as I was praying and being unctioned by the Holy Spirit, I just began to pray for the little boy on him that is broken, and that would make him feel like he had to do what he did, you know. And that was probably the first time that I knew that I was in a place of my healing journey that I was closer to the other side than I was to when it happened to me. Because when someone violates you in such a way, like sexual assault, in your mind, you're like, I could never forgive this person. And the minute I knew that I could pray for him was the minute I realized, like, not only was I really healing, but I was on that other side, because now I started to see him more of a human than the person that raped me. But even in my forgiveness for him, I also have to forgive myself, because one of the things that I beat myself up about early on was like, why did you let him in your apartment? Like, mm-hmm. You already had the gut feeling about this guy. Why did you let him in your apartment? And that small little detail in my story, if I would have allowed the enemy to trip me up there, I would still be stuck in that place. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens for a lot of victims and survivors. It'd be that one little small detail of like, why did you do that? That keeps you stuck. And so I had to then practice forgiving myself and being like, you did what you thought you needed to do in that moment. And yes, unfortunately, it ended up in this type of situation, but look where you are now. So I feel like for anyone that listens and is in that place, forgiveness is twofold, because you have to forgive you for whether it's allowing yourself to be in that situation or believing in someone that you kind of had an inkling that wasn't a good person. But then at some point, I can honestly say you'll get to the place where you can forgive that person, mm-hmm. and you can pray for that person, and you can trust that, you know what? God can take care of people far better than we can. Like, sometimes I want to get people. I'll be like, Lord, I want to get them. But then I'll be reminded that his word says vengeance is mine. So sometimes in the process of healing and forgiving, it's surrendering that person or that thing to your God and knowing that he gonna take care of it. And be okay with, one, how he takes care of it, and be okay if he never gives you privy to how he takes care of it. Because sometimes we want to be like, well, you let me know when you get this person, right? Because I want to be front row seat. And sometimes God just handles it in his own timing and in his own way. And you may not ever know, but there will be a peace that you experience knowing that you no longer hold that person accountable, or it no longer hold a grudge. And I always tell people, I forgive. That don't mean I forget, because
Right.
there's two different things. But forgiveness, with me going through my forgiveness journey, was about Leah being free enough so that I could tell my story, so I could show up as the victorious one and not the victim. Because if I didn't, I would still be in the place of victimhood.
Absolutely. And I think that's so key, right? Like recognizing, I think it's a mind shift that has to happen. And sometimes we don't want to let go of that mind shift of, I got to not forgive them. I can't forgive them. I need to hate them. I need to feel this feeling, because if I feel this, then that means what happened is real, right? That is the connection that we've made, that if I feel these strong feelings towards this person, what I have experienced is real. And if I change how I feel about that person, then what I'm saying that what I went through is not important, or it's not as, as intense or as bad as it is. And I think the two things are separate components.
Yeah.
They do align, but they're separate components, because both things can be true at the same time. You can forgive and still that person is wrong. Your
Yep.
forgiveness does not change that person is wrong. It just allows you to release yourself from holding that burden. Like you're walking, I always use the analogy, you're walking and you're carrying this luggage. Yeah, okay. It's a reminder. Yes, I went through some things. Yes, I've had some sucky things happen to me. And it's also a reminder that you're holding on to somebody else's issues. It's his issue. Yes, it
Yeah.
happened to you, but it's his issue that only God can heal, deliver. He got to be wanting to change. And that's not your responsibility to make sure that he changed or that he experienced the same amount of pain. But it takes a mindset shift to say, you know what, I can't keep holding him in my spirit, right? I
Yeah.
can't keep holding him on my shoulders and making sure that I stay mad and angry,
Yeah.
because it's a lot of energy. That's a lot of energy, and so many. Once I release people, no matter how small or big, like you said, you can remember that you don't let that person do that again. Whatever it is, whether it's sexual assault or they talk to you the wrong way, like ooh. What we not going to do, right? Like I'm going to set a boundary for myself. I'm going to protect myself, whether that's physically or emotionally, that I'll get myself in a situation again. But does it mean that I got to continue to hold it against that person? Because that's a lot of work. You're saying that you're a little God, like you're the one that's going to be the judge, jury, and the persecution, and that's a lot of work. And I think even for a person in your situation that you didn't get that justice in the courtroom, for recognizing the journey that you've been on to get that justice through your walk with God, your spirituality, and understanding that was your rooted factor, that was the grounding factor for you in this journey that you have gone on. So that's some powerful stuff. Tell us a little bit about the organization that you work with.
So I have an up and coming nonprofit that I work on. It's called Save Me. So it stands for Sexual Assault Advocacy for Victims Everywhere. We started it, a dear friend of mine, Carmen, and I, we started it in 2018 because we both were sexual assault survivors. And then Carmen had passed away. So we started it February of 2018. Carmen passed away September of 2018. And so when she passed away, I kind of put it down for a little bit because it was this feeling of like, how can I continue this, what we started with my friend not being here? And then recently, God was like, it's time to pick that back up. And so prior to us starting that, though, I started publicly speaking out about sexual assault in 2014, April 2014. The first time I did it was at a Take Back the Night, which is usually a community event that happens during April Sexual Assault Awareness Month, where it's like a survivor speak out. And from there, I started getting other community organizations and nonprofits and people hearing me tell my story, and they would just invite me to come and speak. And so I've been doing speaking and all of that for going on a decade. The advocacy part started coming in about a couple of years ago because the same court system that failed me, the same police department that failed me, June of 2022, they ended up calling me, and they called me to tell me that they had finally tested my rape kit 9 years after I had been sexually assaulted. And so they told me there was a DNA match, that his DNA was entered into CODIS, and that's just a fancy way of saying like he's done this before, and we now have the DNA of him. And so when they called me, they were like, well, you know, what would you like to do? Do you want to persecute? Do you want to do all this? And in my mind, like your face, I was just like, it's 9 years later. One, two, I'm like, you've always had his DNA. Like, I didn't lie. Everything I told you was the truth. And so what I found was that the reason why they didn't test the kid 9 years prior was because the laws in the state of North Carolina at the time was that if you do your perpetrator, they did not test the kid. And so I told the detective, I said, well, that's contradictory to statistics, because we know statistically 53% of every sexual assault happens, the person knows their perpetrator, right? So if that's what statistics say, why would you have this law that says opposite? And so it was in that moment that I knew that God was bringing this back around for something bigger. I didn't know what the bigger was. And so I remember praying, and I was like, all right, God, if I have to relive this part of my life again, because it's 9 years later, I no longer live in that state, life is good. Why is this coming back up? Right. I was like, how do I do this bigger than me? How do I do it on a bigger scale? And so I ended up having a conversation with a dear friend of mine who does advocacy work in Detroit for gun violence, because her son was a victim of gun violence. And so she encouraged me to reach out to nonprofits and community organizations that were already doing the work and partner with them. And so I did that. And I ended up getting a partnership with a federally recognized coalition here in the state of Maryland. And they were like, absolutely, we would love to talk to you about how we could work together. And so that started the advocacy work that I still do to this day. And I've just been blessed to be able to like share space with law enforcement and legislators and attorney generals and other victim advocates, to really get them to see what's really happening from a survivor standpoint. You know, I always tell people that want to get into this type of work, like, they have all the statistics, they have all the data, all those things. But what's missing is a person who has lived it. And it's nothing like a real world experience straight from the horse's mouth. And so I've been doing that for about 4 years now. So yeah. And now I'm rolling out my own nonprofit to continue it. But that's kind of how I got to be able. But I know that I would not have been able to do what I'm doing now had I not gone on a journey to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be hard, right? It'll be a constant reminder. And so I think recognizing that, again, you had to go through that process. You had to go through what you had to go through to be able to be here where you are today, to be an advocate for those that can't advocate for themselves. And it's so amazing. You know, I'm laughing. I watch, Law and Order and in those kind of things. I'm just in fact fascinated with it. I think because I'm a trauma specialist, and when and they talk about what the law in this state is this, and it's like, what? Why is this the laws? It makes no sense, right? The law is supposed to protect us, the people, the men, the women that's supposed to protect us through the law enforcement and things of that nature. That is contradictory to safety, right? The laws are contradictory to safety, so you don't feel safe, right? Especially being a woman of color, first generation born of a foreigner. Like, there's definitely a lot of things that you're like, I don't feel safe. And the laws are not even in place to make me feel safe, because of all these big, hoops you got to go through. And the fact that, they told you that it's crazy. They had it, but not, not tested. And so many people have that just, that same story where they're like, yeah, they didn't test it, or they test it years later, and they're like, oh, well, this is a serial rapist. It's like, okay.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is my advocacy work opened my eyes to even a bigger problem we have in the United States, because it wasn't until I got that phone call that I even learned that there's a backlog in the United States. Like I didn't know that. And so reaching out to organizations and doing the work and realizing that here in the United States, we have literally over 225,000 untested rape kits throughout the United States. Right. So it took 9 years for me. Can you imagine how many more people are waiting still? And so what we're starting to see throughout the United States is that now, government officials are like, oh, we got a problem. And we need to change some things, and we need to put funding in place so that we can get these kits tested. Because like I say to law enforcement all the time, this is the true injustice. So it's one thing to be victimized and violated sexually. It's another thing to then have faith in a system who fails them, because you don't even send the kit to the crime lab to get tested. So we're dealing with a double violation here. And I will tell you, it can be challenging sometimes talking to law enforcement because they don't see it that way. They just see the dollar amount. They just see the taxes, money, and all that stuff. But it's like, no, these are people's lives. And I always tell people every time I speak, everybody doesn't have what I call the resiliency factor. Everybody don't know how to bounce back from stuff like this. My mother was sexually assaulted. She was molested as a young girl and turned out to use drugs. So I know that everybody doesn't have the withal to bounce back. So when you tack that on to now we have laws, that are more for the perpetrator than it is for the victim and the survivor, then we got another issue. So yeah, the laws are crazy. Here in Maryland alone, like I was blessed to be able to help be a part of legislation session last year where we finally got off the books that marriage is no longer a defense to sex crimes. But for 75 plus years, that was the law. So I could be married, my spouse sexually assaults me, I can go report it, but they're going to say, well, you're married. But these are the laws that, again, are on books all across the United States that need to change.
Absolutely. And the smaller the town is, the worse it is.
Yep.
The less, and I think that's, a lot of small town rapes, Uncle Billy up the street, he's not my uncle, but we call him Uncle Billy, and he raped me. And if I say something, well, Uncle Billy knows the chief of the police department and blah, blah, blah. It's just so many things that you don't feel safe. Like you said, like, they're not going to believe me. Mm-hmm. And then you were met with what your belief system was. That belief system was strengthened by their lack of belief and the coldness and the lack of empathy and care. And, all of those things go into, and I think, when we think about law enforcement overall, just in the mental health arena, there's the lack of awareness and empathy. And I know they're being trained, whatever that means. Listening law enforcement, like, you got to do better, because there's a lot of people falling through the cracks or being treated poorly because they have a mental health issue or they're dealing with something. Say, someone just came off of a experience of being raped and they are having a mental breakdown. Like, there's a lot of things that can lead a person to a mental health breakdown. But if the people that serve and protect, right, that's their logo, serve and protect, don't serve you by being empathetic and don't protect you, you feel like you're alone. So there's a lot of rapes that go unreported, and people are suffering in silence, using drugs or whatever, or end up being on the street and homeless because they can't function and go to work. Like, there's so many layers to this that we don't have the time to get into. But I think, I can talk about this all day. But as it in your own regard. You talked about resilience, and I'm wondering for you, what caused you to be able, I know your faith in God is really strong, but what else was there to help build that resilience for you that you could have that bounce back factor?
Definitely my faith in God. I would definitely say therapy for sure, and just having an amazing support system, having family and friends that literally were with me through all of it. Walked with me, didn't judge me. Those three things I would absolutely say are the reasons why I was able to bounce back. Like, I had people that I can go and talk to. I had people that would check on me, and then going to therapy every week to just process what it was that I was going through while praying to God to help me to get me through that. Those three things combined is literally the reason why I'm still here today.
And so what advice would you give to those that are listening, to help them on this journey if they need a recent assault or something that has happened in the past that's impacting their now? What would be some advice that you would give them?
I would say, one, that it is not your fault. It is absolutely not your fault. I know that's hard to believe when you are experiencing this, but it really isn't. It is not your fault. The other thing I would tell them is to give yourself some grace for this journey. Like, you're not going to heal overnight. It's not going to change overnight. The feelings are not going to go away overnight. And so when you find yourself having intense emotions, don't suppress them. Like, allow yourself to feel, give yourself some grace. And then most importantly, definitely if you're a believer, seek out God, but also seek counseling. Like, I always tell people, especially as believers, you can have the cross and the couch. Like, you don't have to choose. There is no need to choose between my faith in God and going to see somebody. Like, literally go see somebody and go talk to somebody. And if you are a survivor, it doesn't really matter how long ago it's been. A lot of your local rape crisis centers offer free counseling. So reach out to them and see how you can get a counselor and just work through this process. So those are the things that I would say.
Good. I'm glad. Yes, absolutely. Getting help is the first step in really being able to start the journey of healing. You don't have to do it alone, right? You don't have to hide in a corner and power through. But there's definitely people that are trained and are able and willing to help you. I know people don't want it to be, on record because of, they don't want people to know and all those things. And your provider can definitely help you navigate that to make sure, it's, if you don't want, diagnosis or whatever to be on file, there's some ways that you can, either pay out of pocket or find a local rape center or things of that nature that can help you with that privacy issue if that's a concern. But the best thing that you can do is get help. If it's, for you, for the generation that comes after you, is to, speak up, not be quiet. Don't let what the person has done to silence you. You have power to speak up and be bold and be courageous and reclaim your truth.
Yeah.
You are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that you can overcome this. That's the most thing, that you can overcome this. It might seem hard. It may seem like a big old mountain, but if you keep trying and trying, you can overcome and get onto the top of that mountain and on to the other side.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, Leah, tell us where we can find you if people want to get more information about you. You have, your organization coming up and other things that you are involved in. Share with the people so that they can stay in touch.
Yeah, so I'm on social media, all the platforms as Leah M. Forney. So you can find me on social media there. If you want to learn more about me, my work, and my upcoming organization, you can go to my website, which is www.leahmforney.com.
Thanks. Excellent. And so thank you so much for joining us on today. I appreciate you telling your story, being vulnerable, and being open with my audience on today. Because I think that's what it is. We have to speak up. We got to speak our truth so that other people can heal from our our stuff. We're going through stuff they can heal from. They don't have to go through the same thing that we're going through. They can go on a journey quicker because they are like, oh, it's possible that I can overcome what I'm dealing with. So absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us. Listeners, if you want to continue to work on your mindset, I have a workbook out now that is called Elevate Your Mindset, a 40-day journey to wellness through positive affirmation. You can find it on my website, getting-rooted.com, or on Amazon. You can find it on those two platforms. Also, make sure that you follow our podcast where all podcasts are streamed. I'm on Audible. I'm on Heart Radio, all the ones. And also make sure you check out my blog at gettingrooted.com for more information on this topics and other topics. You can also follow me on Facebook at Getting Rooted 23, on IG at Getting_Rooted, and as well as TikTok at Getting Rooted. Make sure that you stay connected, subscribe. Also to our YouTube channel this season, we are launching our YouTube channel, Getting Rooted. So you can find all of our podcast episode videos on there. If you want to watch it instead of listening, those are options for you as well. So thank you so much for joining. Until next time, stay well. Bye-bye.